And I suppose bringing it to the future, just like we were focusing on yesterday, the future of quality. And I think in terms of the QP Diaries, it is essentially to give that advice to trainee QPs, junior QPs, the thought leaders for the future as well. Um, what would be your best advice that you would give to this category of individuals?
Yeah. There's a few points I'd like to go through. First one will be the importance of what I would class as lifelong learning and like continual professional development. To me, this cannot and should not be underestimated. For any QP to be effective, they really need to be continually educating themselves. I think that's a really important part. If we look at, say, some of the changes coming up, which are going to have a big impact on our profession, are things like, say, the application of AI. And what we talked about, say, how is a system that uses AI going to be validated? That's going to be a very key part. So we need to make sure we're upskilled and knowledgeable in these areas. So for me, change is very much expected, inevitable. Enjoy it and make sure that you're properly trained and educated to manage it. So that's one point. Second is more something that I picked up over the years, is the importance of a professional QP network. That is increasingly more valuable, because if I look at the number of people we had in industry before, the industry generally was quite well resourced with people. Today, it's not. So to have access to a lot of SMEs, I think to have that professional network is very important. So to me, time and energy should be spent developing that network, because that network in itself is very, very useful. And that can be done through, say, training courses, or it may be conferences or dinner meetings or such. That network should not be just restricted to external. Internal network is very important as well, with the different departments. And any time spent there, to me, contributes towards preventive action. Preventing issues. What I mean by that is having, say, good working relationships with, say, production, say, marketing, regulatory, knowing what changes are coming up, anticipating them, will then help ensure there's no, like last-minute bits of work that need to be done. If we look at QPs typically, they tend to be, or often taught to be, very much trying to push everything to black and white, where it's a yes or no answer. To me, that has to change. To be an effective QP, you need to be a problem solver, not just somebody gives a yes or no answer. That, to me, is a recognition of the way industry is changing. We have a lot more smaller companies, very agile companies, and they can't afford to have just like an SME QP. I'm not saying necessarily QP is a problem solver, but they should facilitate that. And often they may be able to use other people within their networks to help provide some of these solutions. Other areas are around, say, leadership. As QPs, we're taught well in technical aspects. For me, one area that is somewhat lacking and often neglected is around leadership. Often what we see trainee QPs, they'll go through an extensive training course, be qualified, and before they know it, they're probably heading up a department and a team of other QA personnel. They won't necessarily have had the management and leadership training to be able to deliver the activities to a good level. So for me, develop that skill in parallel. And I would advise having coaches or mentors, and I mean both serve a different purpose, to be able to personally develop that way. And the last point I would put down is around a recognition of business needs. So I think as a QP, let's go beyond compliance. We need to make sure businesses are efficient, in order to be able to operate long term. Compliance is absolute given, but efficiency, to me, a QP can contribute towards. What I mean by that is, if we look at, say, some of the requirements around ICH Q10 and continual improvement, as QPs, we can influence some of that. Bring in practices that will contribute towards the effectiveness of a business's performance. I think long gone are the days where a QP is just purely seen as a batch releaser and signing off. To me, that's a zero value contribution a QP is making, even though it's a basic legal. So I think we need to be looking much, much wider. So I think to summarize for training QPs, look at own self-development, look at how you contribute effectively towards a business, develop yourself as leaders, be problem solvers, and develop that network that you have to be able to fulfill your role effectively. I think as QPs, I think we hold a very privileged role, and I think it's one that's a great role because it allows us to work in so many areas and also very much make a meaningful difference to patients. So I actually love what I do, and I would never trade that for anything else.